This is the Thursday, June 17th, 2021 meeting of the Board of Directors of the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority. We have a quorum present, so we'll get started. The first item up is to approve the agenda. I'd like to, before we, as we approve the agenda, I'm going to propose that we move item 3.2, the bylaw task force update discussion, into the closed session. So we're going to fold that into 5.1. So that's my one amendment for the motion. Other than that, can I have somebody move it into the record if there are no more amendments?
Mr. Chairman, I think we need to state again where we are right now, who we are, where we are.
We do, and I was, thank you, Mike. I was going to mention, please state what county you're in when you vote. So thank you for reminding me of that. Yeah, please state where you're calling in from, the county you're calling in from when you record your vote. So can I have somebody move that into the record? Kathleen did, seconded by Kyra. Vote yes or no with the amended agenda. And state again what county you're from. Mike?
I vote yes, and I'm in Ann Arbor, Washtenaw County.
Rich?
I vote yes, and I'm currently in Genesee County.
Right. Raymond?
Yes, Ann Arbor, Washtenaw.
Roger? Roger, you're on mute if you're trying to talk. All right, we'll come back to Roger. Jesse?
Yes.
And you're in Ann Arbor or Ypsilanti?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I'm in Washtenaw County. Yep, Ypsilanti.
Kathleen?
Yes, and Ann Arbor, Washtenaw County.
Kyra?
Yes, Ann Arbor, Washtenaw County.
I'm also yes, and I'm in Ann Arbor, Washtenaw County. Roger, are you there? Can you hear us? We can see your name and then you're on mute, if that helps, Roger, but we can't see you. At least I can't. All right.
If he's dialed in, you probably need to do the *6 to unmute himself.
Roger, did you hear that? Hit *6 if you're calling in. No. Well, we'll let Roger try to work it out. All right, we'll move on to public comment period. Section 1.2, the public comment period. If you want to address the board on any of our agenda items, please either hit the *9# or hit the raise hand icon, and Mr. Book will make sure you get in the queue. Keith, do we have anybody who wants to address the board this evening?
Yes, we do. Thank you, Chairman Mahler. We have Robert Pulowski. Mr. Pulowski, you've been unmuted.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Robert Pulowski calling in from Southgate, Wayne County, Michigan. I don't really have anything, I would say anything bugs wrong with the system tonight. Don't have any issues of that. I just wanted to come on the air and just say thank you to the TheRide staff for all the hard work they've done throughout the service recovery proposal, getting that started up in August. They did really good on plans in March, and it looks even better now. And I just wanted to give big thanks to all the staff when it comes to the service recovery proposal, and all the hard work they put into that, getting that ready for August, and getting the system back on track, especially, and also big thanks to getting the system back on track in general, trying to get ridership, all that stuff, making all the adjustments. The decisions you guys haven't made, they haven't been easy, but we got through it, and we're almost there with this recovery proposal. And I just want to give you guys big thanks for all the hard work you've done making this system, pull through during the pandemic. And the second thing and the last thing, this one's basically for Kathleen. I was at the local advisory council meeting and I know she was. They had talked about a date in July and I'm not seeing that on the events. So is it still a possibility that they're still going to have an LCA meeting in July sometime, Kathleen? But that's all I have for you guys. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your week. Take care now.
Thank you. I don't know, Kathleen, you want to address that if you know, or you can get back to.
I think that we should get back to him because at this point, our Mr. Carpenter can maybe help me out with this. I wasn't sure if they decided to meet in July or wait until August. Mr. Carpenter, do you remember?
Thank you. I wasn't able to attend the entire meeting. There is a LAC meeting booked on July 13th. Brian, do you happen to know if anything other than that was decided?
We are meeting on July 13th at our normal time, 1:30 in the afternoon.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure because I didn't see it on the events calendar. And thank you as well, Kathleen.
Thank you. Keith, do we have anybody else who wants to address the board?
Yes, we do. We have Ms. Michelle Barney. Ms. Barney, you've been unmuted.
Okay. I would only like to make the request when you plan that you make the evening hours, at least for Ypsilanti, later than they are. The theaters are opening up, restaurants are opening up, and I need to go to those places by TheRide. And it's light until 9 o'clock. And it's too bad that they're not open, that the TheRide doesn't run that late now. But it will be better in the fall when it's cold that they run late. So I hope you will consider doing that where possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Keith, do we have anybody else?
No, Mr. Chairman, we don't have anyone else at this time.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our guests who spoke. We'll move on then to item 1.3, the general announcements. Under 131, there's the introduction of Dina Reed, Deputy CEO. So I'll turn it over to our CEO, Mr. Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We actually have a 2-for-1 deal this evening. We're going to be able to do 2 introductions. It'll be my pleasure to introduce our new CFO, Deputy CEO of Administration and Finance, and then Brian Smith will be introducing a new manager to the organization. So it's my pleasure to reintroduce to the board and introduce to the public for the first time our new Deputy CEO for Administration and Finance, Ms. Dina Reed. Dina comes to us with a long history of successful senior level positions in the transportation industry, in finance functions. And most recently, she comes to us from our sister agency, The Rapid in Grand Rapid. So Dina, would you like to briefly say hello and introduce yourself?
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I would. Hello, everyone. I'm Dina. It's really nice to meet you. I'm really looking forward to working with all of you. And as Matt mentioned, I have been in transportation for quite some time. I did work in the aviation sector for a while, both here in Southeast Michigan and also nationally on national committees and so forth. And then moved on to public transportation, where I worked on the west side of Michigan, and also started getting acclimated with national committees and state committees. So it's the good news is it's most of my transportation experience has been in Region 5, which is the region that we're in. So I know a lot of the folks there and can bring that with me as well. So that's my brief introduction, and I thank you all for welcoming me today.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I'd like to ask Brian to make an introduction.
Thank you. I'm pleased to introduce Sue Fickow, who is on with us tonight. She is our new Manager of Mobility Services, And today is her 4th day, so she's breaking her in quickly to the other duties as assigned, like show up at a board meeting. And I'll give her a few moments to introduce herself. Very happy to have her on board.
Thank you, Brian. Good evening, everyone. It is such a pleasure to join the ride. I have a combination of experience through municipality work as well as senior housing, and I'm really excited to be on the team and serve the staff and the residents.
Well, thank you, and welcome to you both, Dina and Sue. Glad to have you aboard. With that, we'll close general announcements, go to our consent agenda. We have minutes and committee meeting reports in there. Can I have somebody move the consent agenda into the record? Anybody? Jesse, seconded by Kathleen. We'll just go through and yes or no on the consent agenda. Mike?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Roger? I don't know if Roger's back yet. Roger sent me a message that he is going to get to a spot with a better internet connection. He'll be back in a few minutes, but I don't see him back yet. So Jesse?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Kyra?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes. So that is moved. And we'll go to section 3, policy monitoring and development. Any discussion on the committee meetings or the notes, the minutes that were just adopted? Okay, moving on, 3.2 has been moved into the closed session 5.1, so we'll go to 3.3, which is the ownership linkage task force with an update. So we'll go to Mr. Alamang.
Okay, this will be a very brief update. The committee had, or the task force had a meeting on June 9th. It was a fairly, excuse me, I just swallowed something. It's a fairly long and complicated meeting. We kind of concluded that our approach in the past didn't seem to have some problems. And so we talked about a lot of different alternatives to what we had discussed with the board before. And after throwing around a lot of ideas, we decided that another way to approach it and that we should try it out is to actually look at our legal owners in terms of what public information is available from the actual governing bodies. And there's a lot. And this way we can perhaps better understand what their objectives are, what things might relate to us. And Latasha will volunteered to take this on and look, and just as a test, and look at Ann Arbor as the test and see what kind of information we could get that way. And so our next meeting, we will see what we have, excuse me, I still cough, from Latasha, and decide if that's a good approach and we should continue it or consider other things again. So you'll be hearing more from us and about this soon, but that's where we stand now. But let me ask any of the other task force members if they'd like to add anything to that. Jesse or Kyra or Rich.
I don't have anything to add. That's great. Thanks, Mike.
Okay. And anything from any of the board members? All right. To be continued.
Well, thank you. All right, we'll move on then to item 3.4, what listed as 3.4 on the agenda, monitoring policy 2.2, treatment of staff. There is a monitoring report in the packet, and I think we can go through it, and I will open it up for questions or comments as people want to go through it. The overall recommendation for this was degree of compliance cannot be determined. Several of the sub policies within 2.2 were designated as cannot be determined. Roughly half cannot be determined, and the other half were fully compliant. A lot of comments and questions, and so I expect an overall healthy discussion. As we saw on the engagement survey, in most categories, the scores went down, and a few they went up. But I think I'll open it up to everybody. Hopefully had a chance to read it, so I will just open it up for questions and comments from the board at this time before we decide on adopting it. Anybody care to go first?
I have a quick question. So I can't remember what the percentage was of the return on employees. I think it was like 38% or something like that. Is it possible to actually get a number like that translates to what, 50 employees out of 250, or 38% is sort of a little bit floaty for me. I really don't understand what that means in terms of number of people.
If I may, Rosa Maria, do you happen to know what 38% equated to in terms of the number of employees?
I can do that in a minute. Just give me a couple of minutes.
If it's all right, Mr. Chair, if we can give her a moment to look at that and continue the discussion, I'm sure she'll let us know when she has an answer.
Okay, so we'll get right back to you, Kathleen. Anybody, any comments, questions about the report and the comments therein? I guess in particular, go ahead, Raymond.
Yeah, I just, out of all the monitoring reports we received as of late, I found this one to be a little troubling. I know our circumstances over the past year plus have been unique, but I think treatment of staff is still an important consideration, even during a time of a pandemic. So shifting a lot of the things to cannot be determined feels like a significant shortcoming. Whether or not we are compliant, not compliant, or partially compliant, I think not determinate is not a acceptable response. It almost feels like kind of a sugar coating of non-compliance. So I actually don't agree with the suggestion. I think this is one where I would recommend that we actually vote it as not compliant and not making reasonable progress, because we're seeing, of the responses we have received, we see a downward trend in a lot of those areas. So, and calling it, not determinate is not, I think, a fair characterization of what we've heard. So this is one where I feel like we kind of sugar-coated the findings a little bit and kind of created a new category to lump them into so that it didn't look as bad as it came across. And if we weren't satisfied with survey responses and things like that, then we should have taken extra measures to engage our employees more effectively, so then that way we could have heard from a broader cross-section. So yeah, I guess I'll be kind of the bad guy on this one and suggest that this is one of the first monitoring reports that I was not particularly satisfied with. I think it didn't, the responses didn't reflect the direction we thought we were going as an agency. And especially in times of a pandemic where we need to show how much we value our staff, and we need to show that their value is, paramount to the organization. Like if we're not shining now with our staff, then we have systemic problems we need to address within the organization. So that's kind of where I'm landing on this issue. Sorry to be the bad guy on it, but
Rich, sorry, I'm going to click that off. I actually have to agree with that. So in one of my comments, I did mention that it's just a little weird that we weren't able to determine adequate satisfaction, which I think is definitely doable. So I can't say it as eloquently as he did, but I think it's something that we need to look into. And if we don't like the results, then we need to kind of dig deeper and figure out what it is, because when staff is really used to place running, and it's really important that we determine what it is. I know it can be a little subjective at times, but I think we have to figure it out. And if we do it right, then that subjectivity kind of reduces, and we can trust the results a little bit better. So I agree. I think there's a little more effort that we can put into to either determine what exactly the sentiment is, or to try and change that sentiment.
Thank you, Rich. Kyra, I think you were off mute for a minute.
Yeah, I agree with Raymond and Rich. The only thing I was going to add is there was a comment, I can't remember where in the report, but about, maybe needing more evidence to make the monitoring report a little bit more convincing, because the staff response was relatively low at 38%. And I think as far as the standard of like reasonable interpretation, if we had additional data points, I might be able to be swayed that it could not be determined, but there was additional evidence that we were trying to gather. So I think, I would appreciate either within the monitoring report or follow up to the monitoring report, if we want to add additional evidence to make it more compelling, or to have a wider variety of tools to use in ascertaining our treatment of staff, I think that's fine, but the board needs to know what those additional metrics are or going to be. It would be nice to have that in the report.
Anyone else? Mike?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Raymond for volunteering to be the bad guy here. And I think he made very good points. I mean, you look at all the comments on this report, there are far more comments on this report than any other that we've seen. The whole thing just was not satisfactory. And it's certainly, and of course it was said the participation rate is disappointing, particularly, and it was all, I believe, mainly in the operations staff. I think it's very understandable that during the pandemic, in a very stressful period where there were layoffs, that ratings would be down. I don't have a problem with that, but I have a problem really with the interpretation. One thing in particular I want to point out that other people haven't mentioned, at least in my opinion, the comment that the challenges of relying on perceptions rather than objective facts. I think when you're doing a survey of employee attitudes and feelings, you have to rely on their perceptions, and it's difficult to just go to objective facts when we're trying to find out employees' opinions on things. So I disagree with that statement that the CEO made. And I guess I'll end my comment there.
Thank you, Mike. Others? Jesse, you got a hand up?
Yeah, thank you. We had a very lengthy discussion about this in the service committee meeting, and I would very strongly recommend that anyone who hasn't yet looked through the report. I also lean towards voting not in compliance. There's several things that kind of bother me. I did ask at the service committee meeting what the response rate was in previous surveys, and I think the last time that this survey was presented to us, the response rate was 35%, even lower. And as for the majority of the responses coming from operations, well, the majority of the employees are in operations, and that was confirmed to me by that. In fact, this seems, at least in terms of the proportion of employees from each department, seems to reflect the organization overall. I believe, Matt can correct me if I'm wrong, but roughly 75% of our employees are in operations. I believe you confirmed to me. So I made the comment that I don't believe that, especially given that in the past with a similar response rate, the recommendation was in compliance when the responses were good, and now that the responses are not so good, the recommendation is cannot be determined. I think is that doesn't sit well with me. So we did talk in the service committee meeting about how this can be addressed. There was a discussion of town hall meetings, finding other ways of getting an accurate, a fuller sense of how the employees in our organization feel. We also, I think we did discuss trying to come up with a time frame for when we should ask for another monitoring report sometime within the next year before it would normally be due.
Okay. Others? Kathleen?
So for me, I agree. With just about everything that all of the fellow board members have said. I was highly disappointed in the report and sad. Had sad feelings because I am concerned and worried about our employees and the way that they are sharing their feelings through this survey. I'm also concerned that the survey seemed to be the only tool to give evidence as to what was happening with the treatment of staff. And I think that there are other ways to have information besides the survey. I highly agree with Jesse that I would like to see some sort of follow-up on this report and before the next report is due. So I know it's a hard pill to swallow. It was for me, and we need to do better. We need to figure out why our staff are so unhappy and what we can do within our purview to assist them, because I think it was mentioned in one of the comments is that we want to provide exemplary service to our ridership, to people who use our services. And if our employees are dissatisfied and unhappy, we know from personal experience that can carry over into our home lives, can carry over into our job lives and vice versa. So yes, I'd like to see some improvement.
Others? Anybody else? Yeah, for my part, yeah, the findings, I'm not crazy about them. Look, it went down. However, I think we all come from other organizations. I would challenge any of us to show where scores went up in any organization. I fully sympathize, though, that we just came off probably the most stressful year that we can possibly imagine. We had a death in the family, so to speak. We had layoffs all over the place. We were scrambling just to keep the lights on. People were feeling unsafe because, especially early in the pandemic. So I think what you're saying is a lot of that reflected here. And I think I just don't think it's realistic that we say we got to treat our employees better than we ever have before and expect those scores to go up. That will never happen during this. That's just, I think Mike said it, but it seems a little unrealistic to me that we expect these scores to go up. Now, am I crazy that the scores went down and they're trending down? No, I'm not crazy about that. But I think that's a sense of discomfort, isolation, stress, and all the rest of it. I think it's being reflected here. When times are good and we were rolling, the scores were much better than this, of course. So, I'm not, I think to your point, Jesse, about the disingenuous, being disingenuous of saying, hey, we're in compliance when the scores are good, but now that they're not good, it cannot be determined. I fully sympathize with that point. That seems a little disingenuous, but I don't want to make that judgment without giving Matt a chance to respond to the board and give us a chance to hear from him as a board as to why he felt cannot be determined was, the appropriate response for half of those subcategories. So I think he deserves a chance to kind of explain. and I'm willing to give him that. So I think, I would like to hear from Matt, and Gwen is on as well. So if the two of them have any thoughts about that, and maybe I'd like to hear some thoughts about what they think might be done to get things back on track to where we were pre-pandemic levels, and then we can talk about having a follow-up monitoring report after that. But I want to give Matt his time to respond to these. So go ahead, Matt, if you're ready.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, board members. This, I think, is a disappointing monitoring report for those of us in leadership as well as for you. And I am not the least bit surprised to hear that some of you would like to think of this as non-compliant. And I can understand why you might do that. I have been thinking a lot about this report, obviously, since it came in. And I think our path forward, whether you accept it as cannot be determined or not in compliance, my response is roughly the same. And it really kind of gets to what I think I've heard a couple of you saying in terms of turning it around, making sure our employees do feel valued, making sure that these scores begin to, to come back into the area we're more comfortable with. So, frankly, how you accept this report, my response is going to be the same in that regard. We are going to continue to conduct the surveys. We are going to continue to push to get a better response rate. I think it was really hard to do that this time. And by the way, Kathleen, the answer apparently is 97 employees. 38% translates to 97 people. When we had a much higher rate at 52% a year and a half ago, that also included executive team members almost badgering staff on a daily basis. I would walk through the operators lounge and just say, hey, how you doing? Have you taken your survey? Hey, how you doing? Have you taken your survey? And we just couldn't do that this year. Eric is right. This was an extraordinary year. And there was a lot of stress. There was a lot of anxiety. I don't point to that in any way to try to say I'm not accountable for it. That is not the case. I'm quite confident that as those things begin to fade away, a lot of this anxiety will begin to sort of fade as well. And getting to the heart of why we see these scores the way we do, that's kind of one of my big priorities going forward, whether it's through focus groups or some other means to try to understand why. And part of the reason I put this down as cannot be determined, and I didn't share this with the committee because I struggle for a way to articulate this. When I walk through the organization, and sometimes staff know I'm there and sometimes they don't, it doesn't feel like the kind of organization that you see these scores. Like many of you, I have worked in deeply dysfunctional organizations, toxic workplaces. I know what they feel like. I don't think our office feels that way. And I'm going to be honest, I struggle to reconcile that perception I have of the organization with the scores on this. That's part of the reason I said cannot be determined, because to me, there's a cognitive dissonance. There's some sort of disconnect going on. Now, I'm very fully aware that, frankly, a lot of people don't tell the CEO when they don't like something. And trying to push past that to get to genuine feelings is really an important thing that we need to do this year, because we can't fix something if we don't know exactly, what it is we're trying to work on. So my commitment to you guys, however you accept this for monitoring report, or don't, is that we're going to keep working on that. We're going to continue to do the work. We're going to continue the surveys. We're going to try to get to the bottom of it. And when we can identify what's going on, we're going to fix it. I'm not too concerned about that. This is, for every organization I've ever worked in, an endless opportunity. It never stops to find a way to engage your staff on new levels. it is a challenge. It's a real challenge when you can't be in the office. It's a real challenge when people feel unsafe doing their very jobs simply because they have to interact with the public. I think we did everything we could do, but there's no way I can look at you and tell you that we were prepared for a global pandemic. I don't want to suggest we were. But to Eric's point, I think we've all come through this a bit burned out and a bit stressed. And I'm hopeful as that alleviates, we'll be able to talk to our staff and find out a little bit more about, are there things that we can control beneath these numbers? And if so, what can we do about it? So just in closing, however you accept this is fine with me. My response is going to be the same. Let's do the right thing for our staff. Let's find a way to turn the numbers around, and not just the numbers, but also genuinely with the staff on the ground. I do think there are some methodological challenges that this monitoring report, brought to my attention. Perhaps it over relies on a perceptional survey. I never thought that would be a challenge, but I do think we need to go back and add things like attrition rates and other things to mix the data a little bit more, but that will not be replacing survey information. That will just be complementing survey information. In terms of another report, I could understand why you would want that, and that makes sense. One thing we did here was a little bit of survey fatigue. So I would ask, if you are going to go down that road, give us some time, at least a half a year, if not more, because some of these things will take time to turn around. And we want to give time so that people can be willing to take another survey. So there are more specific questions, Mr. Chair, we're happy to try to answer them. But I hope that gives some confidence to the board that this is something that can be addressed.
Thank you, Matt. I guess one other question I have, either you or Gwen can maybe answer this. Did we track formal complaints year over year, pre-pandemic, during pandemic, i.e. number of grievances filed, OSHA complaints, formal complaints in any other way, whistleblowers, anything like that? And did we see a trend there that would lead us to indicate we should have expected these results? So, I mean, and in terms of formal complaints that were lodged with human resources or otherwise, what did we see there?
Sure. And that's a good example of going a little bit beyond an anonymous survey to an actual reported incident, which is frankly what HR can do something about. Anonymous surveys are a little more difficult to grapple with. Before I put Gwen on the spot, we do look at these, all of those things that Eric just mentioned. We haven't incorporated them directly into the monitoring report, and maybe that's an opportunity going forward. But Gwen, even anecdotally, do you happen to have anything to share about reported incidents, formal complaints, whether valid or not?
I do not recall in 2020 getting any formal complaints from anyone, and we have not had any regulatory complaints, EOC, MIOSHA, what have you. And I would say that the grievances, the union grievances, as I think back on the numbers, have been pretty steady year after year. So nothing popped out that would say, oh, there's something else going on here, at least from that perspective.
Any other questions from the board? Raymond, go ahead.
Yeah, just one quick procedural question, because I don't think I've encountered this since my time on the board. If we do vote on something as non-compliant and not making reasonable progress, what does that trigger anything, or does that just get marked in the report card and then we wait another year? I guess, is there any implied corrective action that comes from that automatically, or does the board have to direct it, similar to what Jesse was suggesting for a follow-up survey or something like that?
I mean, we don't have a formalized process if we vote not compliant. So we could, at our discretion, request a follow-up, but there's no particular time limit if we vote D or C or E or something like that. So yeah, we could vote not compliant. We could then say, you know, and that's kind of the segue I wanted to make right now, which is let's take a vote on this. And then if we feel like it's not in compliant, we can talk about a follow-up survey then. So I was just going to introduce it kind of informally, and we will make a situational decision about that.
Are you looking for a motion then?
Yeah, I mean, we've got, I mean, unless there are other questions from board members or any other comments from the staff.
I do, Chair.
Leslie?
So I am interested in getting a follow-up to this report. However, it's not staff's fault that their response rate was low, so I don't want to throw out another survey. But what I'm looking for is something that would get us from not in compliance to not in compliance, but making reasonable progress. So I kind of feel like, whatever the next report is, not looking for more survey results. I'm looking more for a response from executive staff on what sort of steps they're making towards compliance.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, surveys is we probably want to do focus groups or just some kind of other approach at this point to say, to Matt's point, how do we get at the heart of the issues and root these things out, and what's it going to take to turn it around? It's probably going to be a more direct, frank discussion that they're going to have to do. But we'll leave that to Matt and Gwen to figure that out and see what they can come up with. I think we need to take a vote on the compliance report first, and then we can decide the timing in terms of the follow-up report. So we have A, in compliance, B, in compliance except for items noted, C, making reasonable progress, D, not in compliance or is not making reasonable progress, E, cannot be determined. And so, I mean, and I think that's a good point, that one of the options on this is cannot be determined in terms of voting for the monitoring report. So that is a legitimate response in terms of saying, the CEO can't determine something. I mean, that's because that's one of the options we have in terms of voting for a monitoring report. So, but I guess I'm looking for a motion, somebody to make a motion here. Raymond?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion for D, not in compliance and not making reasonable progress.
Okay, so the motion is to vote for D, not in compliance, not making reasonable progress. Is there a second?
I'll second. Jesse?
Any other discussion on it? Okay, we'll go through and vote yes or no, one at a time. Mike?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Roger?
No.
Roger, can you hear us?
I vote no. Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
I vote no.
Jesse?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Kyra?
Yes.
And I'm voting no as well. So the carries with D. I think now we can talk about the follow-up monitoring report. Does anybody have a suggestion for when they want to see it? 6 months, 8 months? I mean, to me, my only comment is we do have to give them time to, I think we should have some discussion about what we think is going to be reasonable progress at this point, and how long that may take. I mean, obviously we have to give them some time to get into it and bring people back to work, et cetera. So I just want to hear some thoughts about what they think a follow-up might be worthwhile. Kyra?
I don't know if this is allowed, but something I just wanted to toss out is, instead of maybe doing a full monitoring report, if we could get an issue brief or a CEO report or something like that, detailing what steps have been taken to make sure that the next time we do see this monitoring report, that the evidence has improved, or, the methodology, what senior staff is thinking needs to be altered for the next monitoring report. I'm concerned that if we say we want a full monitoring report in the next 6 to 12 months, we're going to end up with the same set of data from the survey. And I do think maybe staff and the executive team needs more time than that, considering all the other responsibilities that they have. So that's just an idea.
So what I'm hearing you say is an issue brief at a date to be determined, not a full monitoring report, though.
Right.
Discussion on that idea? Roger, do you have a hand up before?
Yeah, all I was going to suggest is if we do a full monitoring report, we need to give probably, in my view, at least 8 or 9 months to be fully out of the pandemic, the service restoration in place, and things in a more or less normal operating environment. But I'm also fine with Kyra's suggestion of waiting 12 months, but having an issue brief describing new procedures or additional procedures for the monitoring report.
Okay. Follow-up discussion, Raymond?
Yeah, I'm leaning towards Kyra's suggestion as well for 2 reasons. If we push a survey out, Matt has already mentioned that there's some survey fatigue. So pushing out another survey may not actually, generate the enthusiasm needed to respond to it, not, trying to suggest what the results will be. And then if we push it out 8 or 9 months, well, then you'll have to turn around another monitoring report 3 months after that if we're on a yearly cycle, or we'd have to change the cycle. So that feels disjointed. So, if we were going to do another monitoring report, I would suggest, or even Kyra's interim report, I would think something no later than 6 months out that kind of shows what our new strategy will be, so that we can be prepared for a year from now when the new monitoring report comes out, what we can expect in that new report. We can see what the new methodology is. If we have comments on it, if we have suggestions, that can be incorporated before the next monitoring report. But yeah, a monitoring report 8 or 9 months out or anything past 6 months, it feels like that's just going to be one after another and not very productive.
Okay. Any other comments, Jesse?
Yeah, I'm of the same mind, because I'm not looking to see compliance in 6 months, or I'm looking to see what the work is that's being done, how the concerns that were expressed in the survey are being addressed, and what work is being done to get a fuller sense of how the employees of our organization feel. I'm not expecting that we can see like a turnaround in survey results in 6 months, but I do. I would like to see, because I'm looking for progress, I'd like to see it much sooner than 9 months. I think I'm with Raymond. 6 months would probably be the outer extreme of, as long as I would like to wait for a report on what progress is being made.
Rich?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So for me, I'm not really that concerned about monitoring reports type update, right, within the next year. I would be more interested, and I think it's been alluded to, is coming up with a plan and how staff is going to engage, try and figure out what needs to be done to improve overall employee happiness, right? I'm sure even though the percentage is low, I always go on the idea that if there's one person having an issue about something, there's probably multiple people that are having the same issue, they're just not reporting it. And I think that, frankly, is why we're actually seeing a lower response rate in this case. And so I would be more interested in knowing, even a month from now, because I don't want to wait 6 months or 9 months. Like that's in my view, that's too long to wait for some kind of action plan, whether it's we're going to find out who responded to the survey and engage with them and get their viewpoints, and then from there come up with like an action plan. And I don't need something formal, just know like, hey, we are engaging and we're trying to find out this information. Because for me, the bigger picture is that I think we're kind of using the pandemic as an excuse of just like, well, we just had this like horrible worldwide issue and employee morale is low or employee happiness is low, and so we should kind of like write it off. But the thing is, like, this isn't going to be the first time we're going to have some kind of challenges, or it's economic, something else is going to happen in the world that is going to put a lot of strain on staff. And I would like it if we actually had some kind of action plan that we could use as a blueprint in the future that, hey, if something like this happens again, we have some ways to make sure that our employees feel like they're heard, they're supported. And yes, the situation may be crappy, but I've been in organizations where we've had some really nasty situations, but we were able to figure out ways to make sure that the staff, in the end, they were actually felt supported and felt like they were being heard, and there were steps being made to try and ensure and show that we actually care about them from the executive level to the board. And I kind of disagreed with a statement that was made earlier, just like, name an organization where people are actually happy. And there's actually quite a few examples that have even made the news of organizations that have tried to figure out ways and have been successful at keeping the staff happy, even when they're doing layoffs, right? So that's just where I kind of like us strategically to try and figure out how we can actually achieve that in this organization. So thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. I guess my thoughts are these. The reason I voted no on the monitoring report as far as D is because it's not clear to me what we mean by not in compliance. The scores went down, they're trending down, that's not good. But what percentage says, hey, we're not in compliance versus we are in compliance? Like the staff is being treated bad versus they being treated good. Yeah, sure, there was a downward trend for the most part, but it's not clear to me that that means we're not in compliance. And so the reason I voted no is because I don't think we as a board have determined what success looks like in terms of treatment of staff for this. So I'm fine with following up with an issue brief in the near future and getting an action plan and saying these are the steps we've taken, plan to take, have already taken from Matt and the staff. But I think it's up to us. And the reason I voted no is because it's not clear to me that we're not in compliance. We saw a downward trend, but we have to do a better job of defining what success looks like for Matt going forward and the staff if we expect reasonable compliance, because reasonable is a very malleable word. It's a weasel word, and I'm not sure, it's kind of, I'm not sure what it means here. So I think we've got to come up with that for the staff's benefit. So if we're going to hold them to a standard of reasonable progress and then compliance 12 months from now, we have to do a better job of defining that. So I'm fine with the interim step. I'm fine with Rich's suggestion of moving it up. I tend to agree with Rich. I don't think it takes 6 months to at least come up with an action plan and start executing it. To me, I think, we're in June now. I think, by the end of this fiscal year, to me, the staff, you got a lot of smart people on that staff. They can put their heads together and figure out an action plan and say, this is what we're going to execute on it. So I think before the end of this fiscal year would be more than reasonable for them to come up with a plan to say, here's what we're going to do. I don't think we need to wait even 6 months for that plan, or, I think, again, 4 months is more than enough for them to say, here's the plan, here's what we're doing, here's what we're going to do, here's what we've already done. So I guess we're talking about timing now. Do we have, Raymond, Kyra, others? I mean, I think Kyra, it's your kind of initial germ of an idea, that you kind of put forward. How do you feel about timing at this point? Is 6 months okay? 4 months okay? 3 months okay? What do you think?
I would definitely say no longer than 6 months. I think 1 month is not enough time. So, I guess I want to hear from Matt and staff on what they think is reasonable, but I'd say somewhere between 3 and 6 months.
I'm going to just suggest 4 and have people react to it. Just like up or down, so we can move the discussion along. Are you okay with 4 months?
I am.
Okay. Can I just see kind of a thumbs up for Mike, Raymond, Jesse, Kathleen's a thumbs up, Roger, Raymond. Okay, we'll go. We'll say 4 months. So this is towards the end of June. Can we say by the end of this? We'll just say by the end of this fiscal year, we'd like to see an issue brief that includes a plan of how they're going to execute to improve these scores, what they are doing, what they've done, and what they will do before now in the next monitoring report in 12 months.
Mr. Chair, just to clarify, and Matt, you can correct me, I always get fiscal years confused across so many different organizations. Our fiscal year starts October 1, right?
Right.
So September 30th is actually closer to
That's
3 months.
Yeah, it's 3 months. We can say November 1 then.
Okay, so I just want to make that distinction. 3 months is different than 4, so.
Yeah, no, you're right. I'm still thinking 4 months, but yeah, you're right. Can we say then, are people okay with November 1? That's 4 months and a little change. Okay. All right, so the record will show that we adopted this at the D level, not in compliance, not making reasonable progress toward compliance. We requested an issue brief from the staff to be delivered on or before the October board meeting. We'll say that. To be delivered to us, that's 4 months away, with a progress report on this issue. Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, did you say the October board meeting? I thought we just said November 1st. I'm just trying to make sure.
No, I'm confusing it. 4 months, if we'd waited till the November board meeting, that would be more than 4 months, right, from now. So that would be actually, I think, 5 months away, right? October would be 4 months.
Okay.
So I just said, I mean, what I said was no later than November 1st, but November 1st has no meaning to us because we're not going to meet on November 1st, right? So I'm just saying, let's have it delivered for us at the October board meeting, which is going to be the deadline. Sorry for the confusion. Okay.
Eric, this is totally off topic, but I just wanted to note for the minutes, back to the ownership linkage task force, that it was Rosa Maria who's going to help us gather that information, not Latasha. Sorry, I kind of zoned out during that part.
No problem. Yes, it's Rosa. Rosa Maria, thank you. And thank you for the clarification. Okay. Anything else on 3.4, the monitoring, treatment, of staff issue? Got it. Then we'll move on to section 4. 4.1 is the final August service plan. Starting on page 50 of our packet, and that's for Yang, I think, to take us through. So I don't know if Matt, you wanted to tee it up in any way and introduce it to him, or just go straight to Forrest. Leave it to you. Forrest, go ahead.
All right. Good evening. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Since we have gone through this final service plan at the committee meetings, I'm not going to go too much details, but I just want to, before I walk you through the issue brief, I'll talk about a little bit about process. So since March, we heard a lot of feedback. We incorporated this feedback into this final plan. So we made adjustment to a few routes, also the flex ride and go ride. Now it's a final plan. The public feedback period is going to be from June 7 to July 7. As some of you already know, we had 3 public town halls this week. I want to thank to Kathleen and Jesse for participating in all 3. Of course, public members and writers, our staff. So have hearing their feedback. As you probably heard one of the public members say, a lot of work went into this. I want to thank all the staff who helped to prepare all this public town halls and answering the questions, get all the things ready. In terms of the next step, so once this public feedback period closed on July 7, so the service plan will be implemented on August 29. Then all the feedback we received during this process, most likely we're going to consider for next planning cycle, likely January 2022. Of course, as you know, we're going through the long range planning process. The bigger issues or some bigger comments we hear, we're going to feed into the long range planning process for the longer term solutions. Going back to the issue brief, just quickly, so since March, we made tweaks for a few local routes I mentioned, route 6 and 26, 29, 61, 62, 65, 68, and a flex ride east and go ride. So as required by our equity analysis policy and then plus the FTE requirement. We did the equity analysis for major service changes. Those include the discontinued fixed route and plus some major change like Route 45, 46 in Ypsilanti. As a result of that analysis, and we find no disparate impact on minority population. However, discontinue those routes will create a disproportionate burden on low-income population. As you can tell from the equity analysis report, all our service, I mean fixed route service, except for one route being classified as low-income routes. So no matter what we change, we always compare the change, the result after change to the one non-low-income route. So the discontinuing those routes will definitely lower the service. I mean, particularly in this case, service span, and then the non-low-income route. But we have mitigations available for those discontinued service, and we also look at it, initially we had 5 guiding principles for this final service plan. As if you remember, the one is we recover 100% service hours, and the second one we try to restore and maintain a similar service coverage. And the third one, we try to address the on-time performance and making service more reliable. And then the number 4 was to improve the efficiency. Basically, allocate resources from lower productive routes to higher productive routes, kind of a balance that resource allocation. And then the last one was to make the branching structure more, simpler for people, easy to understand. So based on those goals, we kind of reallocate some resources by discontinue a few routes and allocate those resources to improve, mainly to improve the service reliability. So, and then, through some alternative analysis, we don't believe there are other alternatives to achieve the same goal. So that's kind of, as you can read in the issue brief. I want to stop there and then see if any questions on the service plan and on the equity analysis report.
Questions for Forrest? Jesse?
Thank you, Chair. I admit I didn't fully understand how all of our routes could be were identified as low income. That definitely says that I don't understand what that means. Is that meaning that like all of our routes serve an area involving low income people, or is that saying that the people riding the routes, a certain proportion of our ridership is low income?
Well, actually, thanks for the question. I should have clarified that. It's a very good question. Actually, initially, I was surprised to see all our routes are low-income route except one. So the typical approach has been using census data. So we have this block grouped, information, but it's a large area than just the 3/4 or a half mile within a fixed route. So the way the software we use to produce the numbers, they took the census block information and it applied the same proportionally applied to the service area for each route, and then compare the service area average. So certainly, in Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti area, the proportion of a low income population, roughly 22%. But unfortunately, all our services, for example, going downtown Ypsi or downtown Ann Arbor, so it covers sort of a more low income neighborhood. And then that becomes, when we classify the route based on the system average, they all become low income routes. But we're also looking for some alternative approach going forward, see how we can make it more like a meaningful in terms of the other minority route or low income route. I think some systems would use the survey, like an onboard survey, just to look at the rider's profile. Unfortunately, we don't have a statistically valid survey for this purpose. But we do want to look into a different approach in the future, see how we can improve the whole methodology used for this type of analysis. But that was a really good question. Thanks.
Yeah, I would do it. That did kind of say to me that it seems like we're not maybe not pulling useful demographic data, and that can maybe have effects in how we determine where resources need to be allocated. If we're not able to really distinguish low income areas from high income areas, if we're somehow, you know, a route that services downtown Ann Arbor is somehow servicing a low income area, yeah, I get this seems like it could have other effects for other work that we're trying to do. So I'm glad to hear that this is being looked at.
Roger?
Is it, I've seen this in the past, is it possible that some of the low income statistics are due to the large number of students in both Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti whose incomes may be low, although their family income might be very high?
Yes, that's also a good question. Thanks, Roger. You know, like I mentioned, if a route going through university, under their student housing or their campus, or, you know, depends on how the census has been done, yes, there will be higher low income population. There's no question about it. And, you know, we have a system really concentrated on university students. I mean, having a lot of service going through a campus and going through downtown Ypsilanti, downtown Ann Arbor, you know, going through some lower income neighborhood, I would say. And that made it at the individual route base, you will see that low income population higher than the system average, because then we have a route going to, you know, cover a portion of suburb like in Peacefield and with higher income families, and then we'll make it, you know, that route, but it's only a small portion, but it's still going through downtown and the campus. You're right.
Anyone else? Okay. All right, not seeing anybody else, then we'll move on to, I think, the 411 item, which is GoldRide updates. And also in your packet, starting on page 68, that's going to be Forrest and Brian. So I'll turn it back over to them, unless, Matt, you want to lead it off with any comments. Forrest or Brian, feel free to take it away.
Okay. With GoldRide, just wanted to update the board and let you know that we will be coming back to you next month for an approval for giving Matt the CEO, the signing authority for the contract extension, because of the fact of the amount of the change order will exceed his signing authority. This is part of bringing that service back, is the need to have the budget available for him to sign, and he has the authority to do so. Not asking for any approach at the moment, just wanted to kind of keep it top of mind so that you knew that that would be coming next month.
Okay. Any questions about that? Matt, were you going to jump in?
Oh, Forrest, did you want to remind them the fare approval next month as well? Perhaps we've.
The fair, sorry, the fair approval will be like Natasha.
Pardon me, Mr. Chair, we got a little confused. So this section was just intended to remind you that next month you will have 2 action items regarding GoldRide. The first, as Brian said, is the contract authorization. The second is approval of fares, assuming the public involvement part all goes as expected. So no actions tonight, just reminders.
Okay, I think then that, I'm sorry, is there any questions about that on the board?
Yeah.
Roger, go ahead.
Yeah. How do you determine low income verified seniors? What's the procedure for that?
We have a reduced fare program in place now that will need just a slight modification because it does allow for Medicare cards to be used for ID. But the standard that we've been using for years is any agency that provides service or anybody that qualifies for service at 150% of the poverty level would qualify as low income for this service. And we have a list of over 100 agencies that are certified to provide us with those names. And then we review them and approve them and would pass them on to the contractor.
Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, I think the next item then is the fare proposal introduction. And I think Ms. Thompson will take us through that. So I'll turn it over to Latasha.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Happy to be with you. And I'm going to just share my screen with you. And hopefully I get it right on the first try. Okay. Do you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you. All right. All right. So I know that many of you have already seen the issue brief and had some time possibly to read it. And I did also present the fare adjustments to the Finance Committee last week. So we will not try to be too long-winded. We'll just try to hit the highlights. We want to just briefly give the background to the fare adjustments, summarize them, look at the rationale for the fare adjustments, their impact, and if you have any more questions that you may want to ask tonight, we'll open them up. And I'm hoping that it'll probably be a team effort with those questions, but we'll do the best that we can. So just to start us off, many of you may have seen this roadmap before, and back in 2018 and 19, John Metzinger, our previous CFO, did start a fare study to help us look at our current structure, analyze it, create some recommendations, and also to think about what goals that we wanted to have for our fare structure. That fare study was done by 4 Nines back in 2018. And basically that fare study allowed us to have this roadmap in place. And we've been working through that for the last couple of years. So the first phase of that roadmap was to start introducing our fare structure into our budget. And we started doing that in fiscal year 2020. And then the second phase was to actually start developing a fare policy. And you all worked with Rose Mercier and in the past year to create that fare policy that was approved in August of 2020. And now we are in the third phase. And this is where we have developed some recommendations. We have done some analysis with the assistance of 4 Nines. We have done some Title VI review, preliminary. Those were favorable, and we are in public review phase. And I've seen some of the board members already in those public review meetings at this time. And then later on, we'll talk about what phase 4 looks like. But we'll just get a little more into this phase 3, which is the recommendations right now. So the recommendations, we are recommending that we lower the price of the daily bus pass and the monthly bus pass, and discontinue the surcharge for the night ride and holiday ride of $2. And just to get at a more detailed level, so what we're trying to do with the day pass is we want to take it from a current price of $4.50 and bring it down to $3, which changes the multiple of the base fare from 3 times to 2 times. We're introducing a day pass, a reduced day pass of $1.50. And then for the monthly pass, we are also decreasing that pass as well as a suggestion. And we're taking it from a multiple of 38.7 to 30 times for both the regular day pass and the reduced day pass. So I'm sure the question is, why are we doing this? And I want to hit on a few reasons. And so the first, one of the main reasons is to promote ridership. From the fare study, it was noted that the day pass was greatly underutilized. It did suggest that we eliminate it. And when I spoke to our previous CFO, he said that he disagreed with that suggestion because he thought it was overpriced and underutilized. And so instead of eliminating it, the suggestion was to drop the price so that more of our riders would use that pass and that we could increase ridership. And then for the introduction of the reduced day pass, that was done to be consistent with the other passes. We have a reduced base fare, we have a reduced monthly pass. So this was just to be consistent with our other offerings. For the monthly pass, the reduction there was in the fare study, and that was to increase ridership as well. And there was also a need for simplification here, and this is more operational in nature, not necessarily a fare change, but we have 4 different passes going on right now for seniors, for income eligible, for disability, for students. And so we wanted to just have one pass to replace all those passes that I listed. We also wanted to shift the validation of those passes off board. Right now, people are getting on the buses, and the MCO, the motor coach operator, has to validate their pass when it comes to reduced fare. And we wanted to shift that to our actual transit centers, or when they actually go to get the pass. That's also more operational in nature. And then lastly, the surcharge is just to improve the equity among our users. Looking at the area that we are trying to serve, the demographics of that area, we thought that was going to be potentially a risk to keep that surcharge. So we wanted to get rid of the surcharge to make it more equitable for our users. So what is the impact from these changes? So 49 helped us out again, and they did analysis. They worked with our planning department and also our finance department to figure out what is ridership going to be looking like for fiscal year 2022. And they came up with a baseline, and they have various methods to figure out what elasticity to use from industry standards. And based off of that, they came up with that changing those fare prices will increase our ridership by 34,300 if we had a similar ridership as we have listed in the issue brief. And then the revenue, there would be a decrease in revenue of about $60,000 from that fare change, but that would be a more smaller change considering the total revenue that we have in our budget. And so what are the next steps? The next steps is that we would be looking for public input, and which we are already in that phase. Like I said, we'll continue to do that. I think the ending date is July 7th. And then we would be looking for budget approval in September, with the changes being implemented in January. And one thing that I didn't mention is I know that there was a concern that we don't have the full budget at this time, and we definitely understand that, and we acknowledge that, and that there's something that the CEO and the board members have discussed about potentially tweaking the process when we do another fare adjustment proposal. So with that, I will take any questions and I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Latasha. Questions from the board at this time?
Not a question. I just want to say thank you so much for everything that you have done. I am really appreciative of the fact that we're looking at removing the surcharge for Ypsilanti Township. I think that's super important to me. It's just the right thing to do. There are so many people that I know that work out here in Ann Arbor that travel back and forth between the two districts. And that extra $2 can just, if you're working, 5 days a week, times, 52 weeks out of the year, that really adds up. And when you factor in low income and things like that. So thank you for that. And everything that you presented so far, I understand and support.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jesse?
Thank you. I'm very much in favor of the reduced fares. As someone who did actually use the 30-day pass for a while before the MRIDE program was introduced, it never presented much of a cost savings for me. We're talking like a couple dollars per month. So, and it was hardly worth the trip to go get it, which actually leads into my other question. Another, that step 3 of that roadmap, another element of that was technology. I was wondering if there were if there are any plans to make these passes easier to get. I don't like, if we're on, where can these passes be purchased now? Like how easy are they for people to get? And are there any plans in place to make them easier for people to purchase?
That is a great question, Jesse. And I know that we also have, of course, we implemented mobile ticketing. So that was to increase the access to our passengers. And I think I might have to pass the buck on where we can find that. And if we're looking into possibly selling it other places, I don't feel like I can answer that question. So maybe someone else, one of my colleagues can answer.
I mean, are they even available at the YTC right now? Do people have to make a trip into Ann Arbor, either to the Ops Center or to the Blake, in order to purchase these passes?
Does maybe Brian, of course, know the answer to that one? You know what we'll do? We'll look into it.
Yeah, I know they're at the Blake and at the Donga Bay Operations Center. Brian, are we operating out of Ypsi yet?
We are not. The mechanics of cash handling and covering the shifts in Ypsi. In the past 4 years, we have moved. It used to be solely at 2700 and have added the ability to get passes, particularly the passes that require a photo ID at the Blake. And the goal would be to add that at the YTC as well.
So Jesse, directly to your question, only 2 locations. To be perfectly honest, we have not had the bandwidth to even begin to think about expanding where these options are offered. Brian is correct. However, before the pandemic, he and I had wistful discussions about the intent to open YTC as a full service transit center, but we're not there yet. That will have to come another day.
I just wonder how much of the underutilization comes from a lack of availability. I live in Ypsilanti. I commute to Ann Arbor by the bus, and I never, along that entire commute, do not go to YTC, nor do I go to the Blake, let alone the Ops Center. For day pass, it makes absolutely no sense for someone like me to make that extra trip. And it might, hopefully, it'll make some more sense for people now that we're reducing the price for the month pass. But I think that to me seems a pretty urgent issue if we're looking to improve utilization. I don't think, it seems unlikely that we'll see the kinds of increase in utilization if we can't increase its availability.
All right, I just want to jump in if I may. You're talking about physical pass, the paper pass. Yes, there are, certain locations you can buy, but there's a mobile ticketing. So we implemented last year, I believe. So even on Uber app, you could choose, the right 30-day pass. I mean, if people have that option, they could buy on the mobile ticketing app or Uber app. There's different options.
Right, but if we're talking about people who are really looking to save, this number of this number of dollars a month, we're not necessarily looking at people who have smartphones. We're looking at people who are probably dealing more in cash, and I don't want to leave these people out.
It's a good question, a good comment. So
Thank you. Thank you, Jesse. Anybody else? Roger?
Your projections are about a $60,000 loss in revenue, but about a $30,000 more additional rides. Is there going to be a way to, and these of course are projections, is there going to be a way to actually monitor that and see how accurate those projections are?
that's a very good question, and I think we should develop a process so that we can see if our actual results can be in line with that projection. So we would, and Dina maybe probably has more to say on this, but I would think it's a good idea to do that. So I really like that idea, Roger.
Okay. Somebody else had a hand up. Dina, go ahead. You're trying to get off.
I would just, yeah, so it's a great idea. I definitely want to always monitor changes as we make them. I do think there will be some challenges to how we attribute the increase in ridership coming up, given that we're increasing our service significantly in August. I think that it might be difficult to identify what exactly is causing these increases, since we're implementing an additional service at the same time as we're implementing some fare changes or pretty close to it. But I'm sure that will continue to monitor all of these measures and metrics and do our best to find and attribute the causes and what's driving it. But I do think it might be just a little challenging, just as a cautionary.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Raymond, I think, did you have a hand up? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate something I said in the Finance Committee. I actually do have a little bit of concern about the projected net loss on Farebox as a result of this proposal. We've had a lot of concern over our operational costs versus our revenue, especially as we project out into the future, and how we all kind of joke about when cross the streams when our start running a structural deficit in a couple of years. So while I understand, this amount is fairly nominal and only represents a small percentage of our overall budget, that does compound over years, right? So this is year over year loss. And then it also represents, when you factor in inflation and things like that and escalating costs, it gets further exacerbated. So I don't want to minimize the fact that numbers are in red at the end of this proposal, and it's a self-inflicted wound, right? I mean, this is something that we're proposing. We're proposing a change that is actually going to reduce our revenues, which is something we've really struggled with over the last year, even before the pandemic, and then struggled a lot with during the pandemic. So anyway, I just bring up that concern because I raised it in the Service Committee, and I think it is something we need to pay very close attention to. And as a result, I'm still kind of mixed in terms of whether I'm going to support this fare proposal, because I don't know if it's aligning with, yes, more riders are good, and that's definitely one of our ends, but we also can't do so at the sake of, our ability to run buses, because we're, losing revenue as a result. So that's kind of where my head is at right now on this issue.
Thank you. Anybody else? I mean, I'll just add to what Raymond said. I have a similar concern. One, it struck me that even if we hit all of our targets, we'll be losing money, right? So that's assuming we hit all of our targets, we're still going to lose. And if we don't hit the targets, we're going to lose even more. So it would be helpful to see a projection out there, one that shows that at some point we're going to break even, or this is going to pay for itself. Two, and I brought this up to the staff and had a discussion about it. What I'm missing here also in terms of being able to say, yeah, I can support it, even though it's a $60,000 loss, which is, I mean, it's, you know, it's a loss nonetheless. I mean, out of a $47 million budget, is it, you know, going to crater the organization? No, but, you know, a loss is a loss. What I don't have is the full picture of, you know, the full budget to know. I mean, I'm anticipating that, you know, inflation is going up, fuel costs are going to go up, labor costs are going to go up because we're going to bring people back. And so seeing the trend of the costs going up and, you know, revenue either holding flat or going down because, you know, we're voluntarily dropping revenue, it's hard for me to know if I can support this without that context. And I brought this up to the staff as well. And, you know, I think there was some agreement that, yes, that fuller context for the board would be helpful to it. And so, you know, we do have a budget coming up in a couple of months. My concern was that if we don't, you know, we don't see the full cost projection and the revenue projection ahead of the formal budget process, you know, if those costs are going up sharply to the point where the board is concerned about it, then, you know, in August, when we, you know, take a look at the fully developed budget, some people, myself maybe, or others might say, whoa, 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 I don't know if this proposal for the fare reduction makes sense at this point, given what we've seen with the costs. And so, you know, at that point, we're kind of struggling to, you know, are we going to pass this budget? Is this a good idea, et cetera? And so I want to get those projections sooner rather than later. Don't know if we can get those. I'm sure the staff is going to work on that. But I feel a little bit uninformed with this in terms of isolation. I get the rationale for it and wanting to draw people back. And if this is a loss leader and we think this is going to go up as service is restored fully and everybody gets on their feet in terms of the economy, and we have those projections, then that might be something to support. But just kind of having this in isolation again with even if we hit all of our goals and targets fully, we're still going to lose money without the balance of the costs that we might face in terms of those going up, inflation, fuel, et cetera, labor, et cetera. I just don't feel informed enough to know if we can support it this time. And I know we're not asking for a vote right now, and so more information might be coming later on, and I fully get that, but I think those are the things that I'm going to be looking for when it comes time to whether or not support this.
Thank you, Eric, for the comment, and we will be working on getting you the information.
Okay, I know you will. Anybody else? See anybody else? Nope. Okay. If that is all on fair proposal introduction, then we will go to RTA update. And I think we'll turn it over to the CEO, Mr. Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This afternoon at 2 o'clock, the RTA had their monthly board meeting. During that, they announced that they will be working with the provider agencies, including us, DDOT, and SMART, to figure out the best disposition of the American Rescue Plan funds. So I am going to be waiting to learn more from them, but they did sort of stop moving forward with their public discussion of the carve-out that we had mentioned. So that has, at least momentarily, stopped moving forward. They have committed to speaking with us as part of that decision. There seemed to be some difference of opinion as to whether or not that had always been the intent, but there's no value in unpacking that this evening. So generally a positive result, I'm happy to report. We certainly do thank the RTA for listening to some concerns we raised. And we look forward to getting a call from them about setting up a new meeting sometime soon for the 3 transit operators to have some coordination about the use of those funds. That's all I can report, but it's generally a positive development.
Any questions about the RTA update? Okay. We'll move on then to 4.4, a CEO report out. And back to you, Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple items to mention here, a little more detail. I'd like to ask Brian to help me speak about the issue of labor availability. Forrest has been working, his and his team, very diligently to getting services restored to 100%. And that is the plan we are continuing to move forward with. However, recently some challenges have become apparent, not just for us, but I would say for the broader economy with labor availability. And we are recently discovering that we're not immune to this. So Brian, would you like to elaborate?
Certainly. A couple months ago, as other places were starting to ramp up, I had beginning to hear difficulty in hiring, and our HR department had done yeoman's work in getting our advertising up for new hires and making sure we recalled all of our operators. And our advertisement garnered over 80 applications, and I thought, well, hey, we're good. I don't know what the rest of y'all are hearing, but we seem to be doing okay. And in that time, LA Metro, Atlanta, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., and Minneapolis have all announced that they are reducing service because they can't find enough drivers. And also included in that is my old property in Ohio, did a similar announcement. And out of those 80 operators, we only had 6 in our first class, and we had intended on having 10. And we're now interviewing for the second class and only have, I believe, 8 to interview. So even if we offered to all 8, we were seeking originally to hire 20 and are falling short. So we have already planned that we're going to need a third class this year, but they won't be ready for August. So we are working with the run cut for this year, for this fall, to see what we can do with allocating more hours per run. And the other shortage that we have is with technicians. Full disclosure, we've been hiring a technician since I got here, but we're now down 3 technicians instead of just 1. And working on getting those positions filled is even harder than finding qualified driving applicants. So I am working with my staff and the other division heads on what we can do to ultimately attempt to avoid a cut in the runs, but felt it was important that we tell the board at this point that that is at least a possibility, although we are cautiously optimistic that we should be able to field full service this fall. It was important to point it out and say that we are not immune from this problem.
And I'm going to add that we're hearing it even closer to home. We have been discussing with the RTA the restart of the Detroit to Ann Arbor bus service, and after some gentle prodding, they do seem to be in favor of it. But then reaching out to the contractor, it became aware that they are also suffering the same labor availability problems. So conservatively, they said the best they can do to get that service up and running will be October. So this is, as Brian mentioned, something he's pulling out all the stops to address. We will get through it. What exactly is going to happen at the end of August and how much service precisely we're going to be able to put on the street, I will let you know as soon as we do. But we wanted to make you aware of this challenge now that it was apparent that we were not immune, so that no one would be caught by surprise. It is still our intent to bring back full services, and the tea leaves and the crystal balls that I consult do think that if we call it a labor shortage, may begin to naturally ease this fall as a lot of pandemic relief monies begin to run out. People might be encouraged to get back into the labor force. So we're cautiously optimistic about that. But we wanted to bring it to your attention, let you know we're working on it diligently, and we will continue to be striving towards full service. Thank you.
Any questions about that? Anything else on the CEO? Go ahead, Mike.
Brian, the statistics you mentioned are 80 applicants and only 6 people came to work out of those 80 applicants. I'm curious as to how many offers were made out of the 80 applicants.
Out of the 80 applicants, I believe we made offers to, I want to say 9 of them, unfortunately. So
So 2/3 of the ones that got offers came to work.
Correct.
That's really significant. To me, that 2/3 isn't as bad as the 80. And there weren't that many qualified, I guess.
We struggle on a number of fronts in terms of getting from application to interview and qualification. But it presents a challenge all the way around.
Sure does. Thanks, Brian.
Any other questions on it? Yeah, certainly to echo Matt and Brian's point, we are certainly not alone in the war to find talent. That's ongoing. Roger?
Yeah, just that, Brian, you have my empathy. I know exactly what you're going through.
Yep. Interesting dilemma of having to lay people off and then all of a sudden you want them back and they're not there to be found. So, okay. Anybody else? All right. Matt, anything else on the CEO report? All right. Then we'll close section 4 and move on to section 5, which is board education. 5.1, we need to, I'm proposing to go into closed session to talk about a couple of different things. So, per our procedural obligation, we need a motion to go into closed session pursuant to section 8H of the Open Meetings Act to consider material exempt from discussion or disclosure under state and federal law. Can I have a second for that motion? Mike?
That's right, second.
Thank you, Rich. So we'll go down and yes or no to go into closed session. Mike?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Ryan?
Yes.
Jesse?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Kyra?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes. So I think the link was provided separately by Keith, so please use that second link. Mel Muskovitz, our attorney, will also join us there as well. So we'll see you in the other meeting.
Keith, my video will not start.
We can see you. We can hear you, Roger, so.
Okay.
You're just having all kinds of fun tonight.
Yeah.
I think we have everybody but Rich. Rich, were you able to join us again? Maybe that's him. Rich, is that you?
I'm on now. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so I think we're back on the record with the June 17th, 2021 Board of Directors meeting of the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority. Closed session is over. We're back in open session, and we will continue with the agenda. 5.2 is the collective bargaining policy discussion decision. And in your packet, you had as an attachment the proposed policy. We discussed this a little bit last week. The highlighted changes there are in purple. So I want to put it back on the table and see if there's any questions or discussion items for the proposed policy that we began discussing last month. Okay, not seeing any questions or comments then, can I have somebody move to adopt the policy as written? Somebody, Jesse, seconded by Kathleen. Any questions, discussion? We'll go forward then. Yes or no, up or down on the proposed policy for collective bargaining labor negotiations. Mike?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes. Sorry about
Okay. All right. No problem. Roger?
Yes.
Ryan?
Yes.
Jesse?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Kyra?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Any emergent items, section 6, from any board that wasn't on the agenda that we need to discuss? If not, we'll move on to section 7, topics for next meeting. Nothing listed there, but I imagine there'll be something regarding the budget, perhaps. I'm not sure. At least a preliminary look at it, maybe. And I'm sure some other things will come back. Any other comments about topics for next meeting? All right. If not, we'll go to section 6.2, public comment. If there's anybody from the public still with us who wants to address the board this evening, you have up to 3 minutes. Either click raise hand virtually or *9 on your phone. So Keith, do we have anybody who's looking to address the board at this time?
We do, Chairman Mahler. We have Mr. Jim Mogensen. Mr. Mogensen, you've been unmuted.
Yes, this is Jim Mogensen. I was in my own another board meeting, and I know I'm one of the few people sitting between all of us and the end of the meeting. But I did want to make three things that I wanted to have the board at least put on the table to consider at some point. The first is relating to, so we have the fair policy proposal. And I want to make sure that all of us understand the importance of fair media in that conversation. It can have a large impact that may not be immediately available. I'm thinking particularly of in the FAIR study, the issues relating to tokens, and also having people authorized or identified as being low income. So there was some point about having the nonprofits manage the token, allowing just nonprofits to get tokens. And the other was to have the nonprofits managing when people are identified as low income. And one issue that comes up, particularly I'll point it out, with the Gold Ride is a lot of people who had been using the Gold Ride are not associated with a nonprofit. Second is Title VI relating to the fare the route modifications that were done during last year and this year. And some of those haven't been evaluated. And I know a couple of situations, and I will put them forth in some comments during the comment period about places where people are getting left behind and it may not be obvious. And I think those need to be evaluated. As always, thank you very much for your time and attention, and I'll keep in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. And Keith, do we have anybody else, others waiting?
Yes, we do. We have Mr. Robert Pawlowski. Mr. Pawlowski, you've been unmuted.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Sorry, I got the fan on. So I was going to mention this at the first public comment at the first part of the board meeting. It never came to mind when we had the first public comment period during the meeting. This is the last question I have for you guys. So when do you guys plan on having these meetings in person? When do you guys, do you guys have a planned date to have them in person? Is it going to be fall? Something like that. I'm just curious because I have not seen anything online yet about you guys having these meetings in person or any meetings for the ride in person yet. I just wanted to find that out and ask, just curious on that. And following up with that one, if you guys do have any meetings, any meetings for the ride, will you keep that hybrid? Will you guys keep that hybrid option available for people that cannot make it to the in-person meeting? Will you guys, have that option available? Because, some people are not available to, some people are busy or they can't make it out there. It's kind of something. It'd be ideal to keep the hybrid option available if you're going to start the meetings in person. And we guys have conquered Zoom. I mean, we've been using Zoom for almost a year and a half. I mean, I think it'd be ideal to keep, a hybrid method open if you're going to keep a meeting in person. But I was just curious if you would ever consider keeping a hybrid method open and when the in-person meetings are supposed to start up for the ride. But other than that, those are my questions, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your night. Take care now.
Thank you. I think at this point, in terms of meeting progress, all options are still on the table. So we're still working through those. Keith, do we have anybody else?
Yes, we do. We have Ms. Michelle Barney. Ms. Barney, you've been unmuted. Ms. Barney, you've been unmuted from this end. You may have.
Oh,
there you go.
There. Okay, good. When you were talking about trying to find workers, when I talk to people working for the AAATA, drivers, bus drivers, A-Ride drivers, people at the Ypsi Transit Station, there are a lot of things that I don't know if people talk with you people about, because I'm a passenger. I'm not exactly nobody, but I don't have any power over them. People, some of the drivers, and therefore other workers maybe who apply but don't show up, are worried about all sorts of things, such as, will people get into an argument about masks? There's been a lot of violence about that, even on airplanes, and workers are concerned about being involved in one of those things. Work schedules and how little notice some of them have about when they're going to be called into work. If you could get them to talk to you about some of these, they stay because they need to work, yes, and because the benefits are good. But you need to get them, you need to listen to your present workers talking about other fears and concerns that may not be obvious. The other thing is, be careful, don't assume that people who are poor and need those gold passes and other benefits have fancy cell phones. Most people don't, who live in those senior high rises or other low income groups of people. Thank you. I'm glad you're doing all the things you're trying to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Keith, do we have anybody else?
That is all of our public commenters at this time.
Okay, so we'll close the public comment session and then move on to item 6.3, adjournment. Can I have somebody move to adjourn? Jesse, seconded by somebody, Kathleen. We'll just go through and take the roll call for adjournment. Mike?
Yes.
Rich? And we might have lost Rich. I don't see him there anymore. So, Rich, are you a yes for adjournment? You're on mute. Rich, you're on mute.
This is Rich. Yep, yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Ryan?
Yes.
Jesse?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Kyra?
Yes.
I'm also a yes. We are adjourned, and thank you for a productive meeting. Thank you for your time and attention. Have a good night.
Thanks. Good night.
Night, everyone.
Good night.